Martha Jacobs adjusted the silk scarf around her shoulders as she stepped out of her silver sedan, parked neatly alongside a picket fence dusted with wildflowers. The countryside air in rural Pennsylvania was unusually crisp for early September, tinged with a faint scent of apples and distant pine. The meadow brook stood nestled amid rolling hills, its whitewashed exterior glowing under the golden light of late afternoon. Today was her daughter Emily's wedding, and everything looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, elegant, rustic, and drenched in happiness. At 68 years old, Martha had never imagined she would feel this nervous. It was not because she disapproved. Emily and Jared had been together for nearly 3 years, but because today marked a new chapter. Her only daughter was stepping fully into adulthood, into a life that might slowly drift away from the tether that had bound mother and daughter so tightly for decades. But still, Martha smiled as she stepped onto the gravel path lined with flower petals. She had chosen a pale lavender dress, sensible shoes, and the pearl earrings her late husband had given her on their 20th anniversary. Guests milled about the courtyard, sipping champagne and greeting each other with polite laughter. A quartet played near the barn entrance, and someone was already snapping photos of the groomsmen adjusting their suspenders. Martha's heart lifted when she spotted her grandson, Noah, racing between the benches with a foam sword someone had given him earlier in the day. At 7 years old, he had the kind of energy that could fill a room. He was all freckles and floppy brown hair, his cheeks still rounded by childhood. Martha waved and called his name. Noah. He stopped mid-charge, turned, and smiled wide when he saw her. Without a word, he dashed over and threw his arms around her waist. You made it, Grandma. Of course I did, she said, ruffling his hair. Wouldn't miss this for the world. But even as she said it, she noticed something strange. Noah's grip lingered. He didn't pull back right away, and when he did, his eyes flicked around the courtyard as though looking for something or someone. Martha knelt to meet his gaze. Is everything all right, sweetheart? He nodded, but there was hesitation in the motion. Yeah, just lots of people. She gave his shoulders a reassuring squeeze and stood again, glancing around. Everything looked perfect. The chairs for the ceremony were arranged in rows beneath a sweeping oak tree strung with fairy lights. Emily's best friend, Claire, was checking the floral arrangements. Jared's father was giving last-minute instructions to the photographer. Inside the inn, Martha joined the bride for a few quiet moments. Emily, radiant in a lace-trimmed dress, burst into tears the second she saw her mother. I'm just glad you're here, Emily whispered, pressing her forehead to Martha's. Martha smoothed the edge of her veil and whispered back, You're beautiful. Your dad would be so proud. They held each other for a minute, and then Emily was called away. The ceremony was about to begin. Guests took their seats. The music shifted to a gentle string prelude, and a hush of anticipation settled over the courtyard like morning dew. Martha made her way to the second row, where a place was reserved just for her. She sat beside a distant cousin and glanced around again for Noah. He was nowhere in sight. That struck her as odd. He had been practically glued to her side all afternoon. She turned back toward the aisle just as the procession began. Flower petals fell in arcs. The bridesmaids walked in pairs, each smiling brightly. Jared stood at the front, looking nervous and proud. The last to arrive was Emily, escorted by her uncle. The guests rose and cameras clicked. Then, just as the officiant cleared his throat to begin, Martha felt a small tug on her sleeve. She looked down and saw Noah. He had slipped beside her, without making a sound. Grandma, he whispered, leaning close to her ear. Can I sit with you? Of course, she replied, surprised but pleased. He climbed into the seat beside her and took her hand, gripping it tightly. Martha smiled, touched by the gesture, but then noticed the sweat on his palm. His little heart was beating fast. She leaned down and whispered, Are you nervous? He didn't answer. He kept staring straight ahead, but something in his expression had changed. His mouth was slightly open, his eyebrows drawn together. It was not awe or excitement. It was worry. Martha felt a chill run through her, despite the warmth of the sun filtering through the leaves. For the first time all day, she noticed something strange in the atmosphere. The birds, which had been chirping so loudly earlier, had gone quiet. A breeze passed through the trees, making the light strung overhead sway slightly. Noah turned to her again, squeezed her hand tighter, and said nothing more. The officiant began to speak. Emily smiled from the altar. Jared looked at her with watery eyes. And yet Martha could not take her gaze off Noah's face. There was something unspoken there, something that pulled at her instincts in a way she hadn't felt in years. She leaned closer and whispered, "Do you want to talk?" But Noah only shook his head slowly. And so the ceremony continued, the guests unaware, as a silent tension began to grow in Martha's chest. A grandmother's intuition, always just below the surface, had begun to stir. The ceremony had ended with a kiss on the sprawling oak, cheers erupting from the small crowd of family and friends. Jared's best man wiped a tear discreetly. Emily beamed, gripping her bouquet with both hands as they walked down the aisle, their fingers entwined. Guests followed, chatting and clapping, buzzing with the glow of love and well wishes. The reception was set to begin just beyond the courtyard, where a white tent waited with string lights, soft jazz, and long tables dressed in lavender and cream. Martha stood with the others, watching her daughter disappear into the tide of people. She still felt the pressure of Noah's hand on hers, though he had since let go and wandered off in silence after the ceremony. She searched the crowd for him and finally spotted him standing near the edge of the garden, his back to her, staring toward the hills behind the inn. Something about his stillness felt too deliberate for a child his age. She crossed the lawn, the gravel crunching faintly beneath her shoes. "Noah," she called gently. He turned around slowly, eyes wide and glossy. Before she could ask what was wrong, he stepped forward, tugging at her wrist with firm urgency that startled her. "Grandma," he whispered, so low she had to bend to hear him. "We have to leave. Now." Martha blinked, startled. "Leave? Honey, what are you talking about?" "We can't stay here," he said, tugging again. "Please, Grandma. Something bad is going to happen." His tone was not panicked or dramatic. It was quiet, certain, and that certainty struck Martha deeper than any shout or cry could have. She straightened up slowly, eyes scanning the garden again. Guests were laughing, servers passing trays of sparkling cider and stuffed mushrooms. The string quartet had resumed, their melody weaving gently through the summer air. Nothing looked wrong, but Noah didn't budge. He was still holding her wrist, his knuckles pale. Martha knelt beside him, her voice low. "Why do you want to leave?" Noah hesitated, his mouth opening slightly before he answered. "I had a dream," he said. "It was the same as this. Same people, same place. But then there was a big noise, and the sky got dark. You and me, we ran away. Everyone else stayed." Martha stared at him, her heart thumping now, not because she believed him, not fully, not yet, but because he was speaking with a calmness she wasn't used to hearing in children. She wanted to dismiss it as wetting nerves or a child's imagination running wild. But his face, pale and unblinking, made her hesitate. "Did you tell your mom?" she asked. He shook his head. She wouldn't listen. "And what exactly did you see? What was the big noise?" He looked down at his feet. "I don't know, but it wasn't good." Martha looked over her shoulder at the tent. The wedding party had gathered near the head table. A DJ was setting up near a small dance floor. Emily and Jared were posing for photos, all joy and ease. The air was still warm, the sun still golden. And yet, standing here with Noah, the world felt dimmed by a strange fog. Not one she could see, but one she could feel. She looked back at him. "You want to leave right now?" He nodded slowly. She wanted to say no, to laugh, to pat his head and tell him everything was fine. But something inside her, something buried deep from years of raising children, of losing a husband, of surviving long, quiet nights alone, something old and wise, held her still. The words died in her throat. "All right," she said at last. His eyes widened, not with fear this time, but with quiet relief. Martha rose and took his hand. They began to walk toward the side of the inn, taking a path that led toward the back parking lot. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She didn't pause to make excuses or explanations. Her coat still hung on the back of her chair inside the tent, but she didn't turn back for it. As they rounded the building, the sounds of the reception faded, replaced by the soft hum of wind through trees and the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. The parking lot was half full. Cars lined up under the shade of tall maples. Martha's sedan sat quietly at the end. She unlocked it with a click and opened the passenger door for Noah. "Buckle up," she said. He nodded and obeyed without question. Martha slid behind the wheel, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the ignition. The engine hummed to life, and she pulled out a lot, tires whispering against the pavement. They drove in silence for a while. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the road. The winding path out of the valley was familiar. She had driven it many times before. Still, tonight it felt unfamiliar. Every tree and bend in the road felt heavier, more significant. Finally, she spoke. "Are you feeling better now?" Noah looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Yes." Martha glanced at him. "Are you sure? You really scared me, you know?" He turned his gaze to the window. I just didn't want you to get hurt." His voice was so small in that moment. It cracked something open in her. She reached over and touched his knee gently. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. We're okay." As they reached the edge of town, Martha turned on the radio. A soft static filled the car before the station came through. A woman's voice was in mid-sentence. "Residents near the Meadowbrook area are advised to evacuate immediately due to an ongoing emergency." Martha froze. Her foot lifted from the accelerator. "A suspected gas leak has been reported. Fire and rescue teams are en route. If you are in the immediate vicinity, please exit the area as soon as possible." She reached for the volume knob and turned it up, the rest of the message now sharp and clear. "Authorities are urging all attendees of the private event at the inn to move to safety. We repeat, a gas leak has been detected in the Meadowbrook Valley." Noah sat still, his hands folded in his lap. Martha pulled into a nearby lot outside a closed antique shop and parked. Her hands trembled against the wheel. She could still hear the faint hum of the radio, the calm tone of the announcer contrasting violently with the racing of her heart. She turned to Noah, who hadn't said a word since the broadcast. "How did you know?" He looked up at her slowly. "I just did." His answer brought no peace, no clarity, only more questions. Martha stared at her grandson, trying to read him, to understand what could possibly make a child sense something like that. But all she saw in his eyes was the same quiet certainty that had been there from the start. He turned and looked out the window again, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The weight of what they had just escaped had not yet settled. It hung in the air, waiting. And somewhere behind them, a wedding continued in laughter and clinking glasses, unaware how close the celebration had come to disaster. The antique shop's parking lot was quiet, the low evening sun now slipping further behind the tree line, painting the sky in orange and violet streaks. Martha sat motionless behind the wheel of her sedan, staring ahead but seeing nothing. The emergency broadcast had ended. Static hummed softly from the radio, but she didn't reach to turn it off. Her fingers rested loosely on the steering wheel, her mind spiraling. Noah remained silent in the passenger seat, still gazing out the window, his small profile lit by the fading sun. His calmness had not wavered. He didn't seem proud, didn't seem relieved, just still. That stillness began to unnerve her more than anything. Martha finally turned off the radio and broke the silence. "We need to call someone." He nodded without turning. Martha fumbled for her phone in her handbag, her fingers not quite steady. As she unlocked it, a vibration buzzed through the screen, a text message from Emily. It was brief and frantic. "Where are you? Are you okay? Please call me." Martha didn't respond immediately. Her thumb hovered over the call button. 100 thoughts crowded her mind at once. What would she say? That her grandson had warned her through a dream? That she had simply obeyed a child's instinct and walked out before disaster struck? It sounded insane even to her. She pressed the call button anyway. The line rang only once before Emily answered. "Mom, thank God, where are you?" Her voice was tight with panic. "We're okay," Martha said softly. "We're out of the valley. We didn't. She stopped, unsure how to explain. Emily's voice cracked. We had to evacuate. There was some kind of gas leak. The fire department showed up and started clearing everyone out. People were coughing, Mom. Some of the older guests got dizzy. I heard it on the radio, Martha said. That's why we left. Noah, Emily's voice wavered. He's with you? Yes, sweetheart. He's right here with me. He's safe. Emily exhaled, a long, shaking breath. I didn't know where he was. I looked everywhere. I thought maybe he wandered off. And then someone said they saw you leaving with him, but I didn't. Her voice broke again. Why didn't you say anything? Martha swallowed. She glanced at Noah. He told me we had to go. I didn't understand it, but I listened. A pause filled the line. Then Emily spoke again, more carefully this time. He told you to leave? Yes. Another pause. How would he know anything was wrong? Martha didn't answer. There was no simple explanation. I'll come to you, Emily said. Where are you? Martha gave her the name of the shop. They ended the call, and Martha dropped the phone into the console. The sudden weight of everything came crashing down. She hadn't just walked away from a wedding. She had trusted a warning no one else had received. And now, there was no turning back from what that choice implied. She finally turned to Noah. Do you want to tell me more about the dream? He turned slowly to her. It was just pictures, he said, but they felt real. I saw everyone dressed nice. I saw the tent. I saw you, and I saw the sky turning gray. People started coughing. Someone fell, and then we were running away. Martha's breath caught. Did you tell anyone else about this before today? Noah shook his head. I thought maybe it wouldn't happen. And how did it feel when you saw it? Scary, but not like a nightmare. Just true. Martha stared at him, her mind racing to process what that meant. She reached out and held his hand again. It felt as small and warm as always, but now carried a weight she couldn't define. The sun had dipped lower now, casting longer shadows over the car. Just as she reached to turn the engine back on, a sudden gust of wind blew across the lot. The trees rustled violently. A loose sheet of paper whipped across the windshield. Then, for a brief moment, the air turned cold, unnaturally cold. Martha shivered. She glanced at Noah. He was already looking up. It's not over, he said softly. What do you mean? He blinked slowly. Something else is coming. Before she could respond, headlights flashed across the parking lot. Emily's car pulled in fast and crooked, tires skidding slightly on the gravel. She jumped out before the engine even stopped, rushing toward Martha's side of the car. Martha got out quickly, and they met halfway. Emily pulled her son into her arms, crushing him with relief. Oh my God, Noah, you scare me so bad. She kissed the top of his head, eyes squeezed shut. Martha stood back, allowing him the moment, but Emily's relief soon turned to confusion. She looked at her mother, her expression clouded. Why didn't you say anything? You just vanished. I didn't have time to explain, Martha replied quietly. He asked me to trust him. I did. Emily looked between them, but how could he possibly know? The leak was underground. No one smelled anything until the last few minutes. The staff had no clue. I don't know, Martha said, but he did. They stood in silence for a moment. The air had gone still again. I talked to one of the firefighters. Emily said after a moment, he said the leak was spreading faster than normal, that if they'd gotten there even 15 minutes later, things could have gone very differently. Martha's chest tightened. She didn't need the details. She could fill in the rest. Noah, now back beside her, looked up again at the sky. We should go home. Emily hesitated. The inn's off limits now anyway. They're closing it down until it's safe. Martha opened the car door and glanced at her daughter. Come back with us. Stay the night. Emily nodded slowly, still clinging to Noah's hand. Yeah, I think I need to. The three of them climbed into the car and pulled away from the lot. The road ahead was quiet, but a heaviness lingered in the air, as though something unseen had brushed too close. As the night deepened, Martha couldn't help but wonder. If Noah had seen this coming, what else did he know that he hadn't yet shared? And if the chill in the air was any sign, Maybe this was only the beginning. The drive back to Martha's house was long and mostly quiet, the tires humming over the back roads as the daylight disappeared completely. Streetlights in the small town flickered to life one by one, casting long streaks across the windshield. Emily sat in the passenger seat, arms folded tightly across her chest. She glanced back at Noah periodically, as if checking to make sure he was still really there. He had fallen asleep soon after they left the parking lot, his small head resting against the window, breath slow and steady. Martha kept her eyes on the road, the yellow lines guiding her as her thoughts spun. She was trying to stay focused, but everything about the day had carved deep grooves in her mind. Grooves she couldn't smooth over. There was no logic she could apply, no book or past experience to file this under. Something beyond her understanding had happened, and she had obeyed an instinct that now made her question everything she thought she knew about the world. When they finally turned onto her street, a quiet lane lined with tall sycamores and wide porches, Martha felt a small breath escape her. Home had never looked so still. She pulled into her driveway and cut the engine. Emily stirred but didn't immediately move. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Martha turned to her. "Do you want to carry him in, or should I?" Emily looked at her son, then unbuckled and slipped into back seat. She gently shook Noah awake. "Sweetheart, we're home." He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and followed her out, groggy but compliant. The three of them walked up to the front porch together, Martha unlocking the door and stepping aside to let them in first. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old wood. The lamps in the living room gave off a warm, soft glow. Everything was exactly where Martha had left it that morning, and yet it all felt different now, as though the house had been waiting for them. Emily led Noah to the guest bedroom, while Martha went to the kitchen to make tea. Her hands still trembled slightly as she measured the leaves and filled the kettle. When the whistle finally shrieked, she jumped a little. She carried 2 mugs back to the living room. Emily was already there, curled into the corner of the couch, staring at the dark window. She accepted the tea without a word. Martha sat beside her. For a while, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the distant creak of the house settling. Then Emily spoke. "I'm not sure if I'm more scared of what happened, or that I'm starting to believe he really saw it before it did." Martha didn't answer right away. She took a sip of tea, let the warmth sit on her tongue. "Something's changed in him," she said finally. "You saw how calm he was." "How certain?" Emily nodded. "He's never talked like that before. And the way he looked at me when I asked him why he left with you, he didn't flinch. It was like he knew I wouldn't understand." Martha set her mug down. "I didn't understand either, but I still went." Emily turned to her. "Why? What made you go? You've never been one to panic." "I didn't panic," Martha said. "I listened. I can't explain it, but something in his voice, something in his eyes. It was like the part of me that raised you. That part just knew." Emily looked down into her tea. "What if it happens again?" Martha hesitated. "Then we listen again." Upstairs, Noah stirred. They both heard the creak of the hallway floorboards. A moment later, he appeared at the top of the stairs, blanket clutched in one hand. "I'm not sleepy anymore," he said softly. Martha patted the seat beside her, and he came down and nestled next to her, his small frame fitting perfectly into the curve of her side. Emily watched him, her eyes filled with emotions she didn't yet know how to name. "Noah," she said, her voice gentle, "can you tell me more about what you saw?" He shrugged, not as if he didn't care, but as if he didn't know how to explain. "It was just like pictures, like a movie I already watched. But I was in it." Emily leaned forward. "Did you see anyone else? Anything else that stood out?" Noah looked up at the ceiling, then slowly nodded. There were lights, flickering, and a sound like something buzzing really loud. "Then I saw smoke, and people running, but they couldn't breathe." Martha and Emily exchanged a glance. "And what about us?" Emily asked. Noah smiled faintly. "We were gone before it started. We were in the car." Martha pulled the blanket over his legs and kissed his forehead. "You were very brave, Noah. You did something most grown-ups wouldn't." He yawned. "I just didn't want to lose you." Emily reached out and took his hand. You won't. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep again on the couch between them, Emily stood up and stretched. Her movements were slow, as though the weight of the day still pulled at her shoulders. I should try to sleep, she said. I don't think I can, but I should try. You can take my bed, Martha offered. I'll be fine in the guest room. Martha watched her go, her footsteps soft against the wooden stairs. She stayed with Noah a while longer, brushing a hand gently through his hair, her thoughts loud in the silence. At some point past midnight, the wind picked up again. The trees outside began to sway, and the old shutters creaked. Martha stood and walked to the window. A single leaf pressed against the glass, then tumbled away. She watched the street, empty and motionless. Something shifted in her then. Not fear, exactly, but the deep awareness that whatever had come over them today wasn't finished. She had left that in not just because of her grandson's words, but because something in the world around them had responded to his warning. There had been a decision in the wind, and she had answered it. At exactly 7 o'clock the next morning, Martha awoke to the shrill ring of her landline, an old rotary-style phone that rarely rang anymore unless it was a telemarketer or an old friend from the library board. She sat up slowly, blinking against the morning light that filtered through the lace curtains, her back aching slightly from falling asleep in the armchair again. Noah's blanket was still warm on the cushion next to hers, but he was gone. She picked up the phone on the third ring. Hello? Martha, it's Cheryl from the Historical Society. Are you okay? Martha rubbed her temple, confused. Yes, why? What's going on? Oh, thank God. It's all over the news. Meadowbrook Inn, the gas leak, the evacuation, everything. They're saying it was serious. Some people were hospitalized. I didn't know if you were still there with the wedding. Martha's blood ran cold. She stood up, moving toward the kitchen window. The street outside was peaceful, but her thoughts were racing. We left early, she said. Well, I'm glad you did. They're saying the leak was caused by a fractured main line underground. No one even knew it was damaged until it was too late. One of the responders said it could have exploded. You should turn on the TV, Channel 5. Martha ended the call gently, her fingers trembling as she set the phone back on the hook. She turned on the television in the living room and adjusted the volume just as the news anchor cut to a live report from Meadowbrook Valley. The screen showed yellow caution tape surrounding the inn, emergency vehicles parked on the grass, and several staff members being interviewed in hushed voices. Emily entered the room still in her robe, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. Is that about the wedding? She asked. Martha nodded. They're saying it could have been deadly. Emily sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. A female reporter stood in front of the inn's main entrance, microphone in hand. And while no fatalities were reported, sources confirmed that 3 elderly guests were taken to the hospital due to severe exposure symptoms. Officials are still investigating the extent of the gas leak, but they confirmed it was a ruptured underground line, then will remain closed for the foreseeable future. Emily leaned forward, jaw tightening. This wasn't just a fluke. It could have been a tragedy. Martha didn't respond. Her gaze remained on the screen as footage shifted to pan across the crowd from the previous day, guests scattered in formal wear, some coughing into tissues, others looking around in confusion. Noah appeared quietly behind them, fully dressed and barefoot, holding a piece of paper. Martha turned as he entered, and Emily immediately rose to wrap him in a hug. Are you hungry? She asked, pressing a kiss to his head. He shook his head, eyes focused on the television. That's where the wedding was. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, that's where we were. Noah watched silently for a moment, then held out the paper in his hand. It was folded twice, as though he had been hiding it in his pocket. I made this last week, he said. Emily unfolded it slowly and stared at the sketch. Martha leaned over to look. It was drawn in crayon and pencil, the lines childlike but clear. The inn was there, unmistakable. Overhead, dark swirling clouds loomed, and faint lines representing wind or smoke billowed across the image. There were stick figures scattered outside the inn, some lying down, others running. And off to the side, a car was drawn with 2 small figures inside, smiling. Emily looked at her son, stunned. You drew this before the wedding? He nodded once. Martha took the page and turned it over. In the corner, written in crooked letters, was the date. 2 days before the ceremony. Emily sat back down, holding the paper like a fragile artifact. "Why didn't you show this to anyone?" she asked. "I thought it was just a dream," Noah said. "But then, yesterday, everything started to look the same, so I knew it was going to happen." Martha felt the weight of the moment settle fully around them. It was no longer just a story of instinct or luck. This was something beyond that, something they would have to confront head-on. By noon, her front door rang twice. First, it was a local reporter from the Pennsylvania Ledger, asking politely for a comment on the circulating rumor that a guest had left just before the incident based on a child warning. Martha closed the door without offering a single word. Then came Jared's mother, Meredith, dressed in an impeccable blazer, her expression a calculated blend of concern and suspicion. "I thought I'd come by," she said, stepping into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "We heard you, and Noah left the wedding very early." Emily stood stiffly. "We left because we needed to." "I'm not here to argue," Meredith said. "But there are people talking, Emily. Guests are wondering why you and your son vanished just before everything happened. Some think you knew something. Others think it was a strange stunt." "A stunt?" Martha repeated, incredulous. "You think I'd fake something like that?" "I'm saying it's suspicious," Meredith said evenly. "You could have warned people. You could have told the staff." "We didn't have proof," Emily snapped. "It was a feeling, a child's dream. What were we supposed to do? Shout danger in the middle of the ceremony?" Meredith turned to Noah, her gaze softer. "You scared a lot of people, sweetheart. You understand that, don't you?" Noah didn't answer. He was sitting on the staircase, looking down at his hands. Martha stepped between them. "He saved lives. If you can't see that, then you don't belong in this house." Meredith's mouth tightened, but she said nothing more. She picked up her purse and walked out, heels clacking against the porch. The silence that followed her departure was thick. Emily sat down slowly, head in her hands. "This is going to get worse, isn't it?" Martha nodded. "Probably." Emily looked over at her son again. "I don't care what they say. He's not crazy. He's not making this up." "I know," Martha said, "but we have to be careful. People don't like what they can't explain." Noah glanced up from the stairs. "It's not over." Martha turned sharply. "What do you mean?" He blinked slowly. "I saw something else, but I didn't draw it." Emily walked to him, kneeling beside him. "What did you see, honey?" Noah hesitated. "Someone falling. A man. I don't know who, but it was inside a house. Not ours." Martha and Emily locked eyes. "Did you recognize the house?" Emily asked gently. Noah shook his head. "But I think we're supposed to find it." At precisely 11 minutes past noon, the first signs of something wrong began to ripple through the Meadowbrook Inn's reception area. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses paused near the dessert table, sniffing the air with a puzzled expression. He looked down, shook his head slightly, and moved on. A guest from the groom's side, a man in his late 60s, stood beside one of the white columns, rubbing his temples and blinking hard, as though the light had suddenly become too much. The soft jazz drifting through the tent was replaced by the first dance, a slow and nostalgic ballad that brought Emily and Jared to the center of the dance floor. The guests circled around them with delighted faces and camera phones raised. The world narrowed in those few moments to one couple swaying under a canopy of white lights, smiling as though nothing could ever darken their joy. Then the flicker came. It was subtle at first. A brief stutter in the light, strings overhead. 1 second they were glowing steadily. The next they blinked twice, paused, then resumed. Most guests didn't notice. Those who did dismissed it. Cheap wiring, maybe, or a battery pack on its last legs. But then the flicker happened again. Longer this time. Lights blinked out completely, and when they returned, they seemed dimmer. Uneasy glances passed through the crowd, but the music continued, and Emily and Jared danced on unaware. At the edge of the tent, the same waiter from before dropped his tray. It shattered loudly, causing several guests to jump. Glass scattered across the tiled platform, and the waiter clutched his nose, eyes watering. "Does anyone else smell that?" he asked, voice strained. "It's like fuel or something." Heads turned. Conversations quieted. One of the bridesmaids stepped forward, brow furrowed. "I thought it was just the candles," she said, glancing toward the centerpieces. "But it's getting stronger." People began to murmur. Emily stopped mid-step and looked around, alarm flashing in her eyes. "Jared, do you smell it?" He nodded slowly, nose twitching. "Yeah, it's like propane." The DJ leaned into the microphone, voice shaky. "Folks, we're just going to take a short break while we check something out. Please remain calm." But it was too late for calm. The same older guest who'd been rubbing his temples earlier suddenly staggered sideways and collapsed into a chair, gasping. Two others rushed to him, one yelling for help. Then, like a fuse snapping, the atmosphere changed entirely. The tent erupted in motion. Guests backing away, shouting, some already covering their noses and mouths. Someone knocked over a table. Another man near the dance floor keeled forward, retching into the grass. The faint odor of gas was no longer faint. It clung to the air like a warning, thick and urgent. A hotel staff member ran into the tent, eyes wide. "Everyone needs to get out now. There's a leak. We've already called it in." Chairs scraped back. High heels clattered against the wood flooring. Panic, sudden and primal, swept through the gathering like a current. In the chaos, the music stopped abruptly. The mic fell to the ground with a hollow thud. Emily's heart pounded as she searched the crowd. "Noah," she shouted. "Mom." She moved quickly through the guests, hands pushing aside bodies as she tried to scan every face. She turned to Claire, her maid of honor. "Have you seen Noah?" Claire shook her head, covering her mouth with a napkin. "I thought he was with you." "He was." "And Mom." She was sitting right in front during the ceremony. Emily's voice cracked as the implications hit her. They were gone. She hadn't seen either of them since before the reception began. A fire alarm sounded in the distance, its blaring cry cutting through the chaos. Staff members attempted to guide people to the nearest exits, but the panic had taken root. Someone fell. Someone screamed. A small child began to cry as his mother dragged him toward the parking lot. The smell intensified. Jared found Emily near the dance floor. He gripped her arm. "We need to go." "I can't find Noah," she said, her voice trembling. "And my mom. I don't know where they went." Jared turned in a slow circle, scanning. "Maybe they're outside already. Maybe they went to the car." Emily shook her head. "No, I would have seen them. I would have known." Jared cupped her face. "We'll find them, but we can't stay here." She hesitated only a moment longer, then nodded. They joined the exodus toward the outer lawns, weaving through overturned chairs and panicked voices. Behind them, a staff member pulled the emergency shutoff valve near the catering area, hoping to stem the leak. But the gas had already filled parts of the tent and seeped into the lower levels of the inn. Outside, dozens of guests stood near the gravel lot, coughing and murmuring, many of them pulling out phones to call family or film the aftermath. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, sirens piercing the afternoon quiet. Fire trucks parked along the grassy edge. Paramedics rushed forward, assessing guests for symptoms of gas inhalation. Police officers began moving people further back, establishing a perimeter. Emily kept asking anyone she saw, staff, family, strangers, if they had seen her son, her mother. No one had. Claire found her again, this time with news. "I talked to the valet," she said, breathless. "He said your mom's car is gone. She left maybe 20 or 30 minutes before the alarm went off." Emily blinked. "She left?" Claire nodded. "With Noah?" Emily sat down heavily on a stone ledge near the path. Jared knelt beside her. "She knew," Emily whispered. Somehow she knew. She pulled out her phone and stared at it. 2 unread texts sat there from her mother, the one she had missed in the chaos. She opened the first. "We're leaving early. Don't worry. I'll explain later. Trust me." The second message had come minutes later. Noah was right. Emily looked up from the screen, her breath catching. Around her, people were being treated, comforted, reunited. But her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Her son had known. Her mother had listened. She looked toward the hills, where the road wound away from the inn. And for the first time that day, her fear shifted into something else. Something raw and unsteady. Wonder. The air inside Martha's house felt oddly thick, as if it too had absorbed the weight of the day's revelations. Though the television had long since been turned off, the silence that filled the living room carried the echo of every siren, every shout, every unanswered question from the Meadowbrook Inn. Outside, dusk had begun to descend, painting the neighborhood in soft shadows. The porch light flicked on automatically, casting a gentle glow against the gathering dark. Martha sat on the couch with her hands wrapped tightly around a lukewarm mug of tea she hadn't sipped in nearly an hour. Noah sat beside her on the floor, a spiral notebook open in his lap, his fingers moving across the page with a crayon. He hadn't spoken much since they returned from the parking lot earlier in the day. He hadn't needed to. His silence, like his drawings, spoke for him. From the kitchen came the soft sound of the refrigerator door closing. Emily reappeared moments later, carrying a glass of water. She moved slowly, like someone recovering from a long illness. Her face was pale but calm now, though her eyes still carried a kind of distant thunder, one that had not yet found a place to land. She sat across from them in the armchair, her voice steady but low. "I keep trying to replay it all. I keep wondering what would have happened if you hadn't left." Martha didn't answer immediately. She stared into the tea as though trying to read its surface. "You don't need to imagine it," she said finally. "We heard the report. We saw the scene." Emily nodded. "People are texting me, calling me. Jared's still at the hospital helping his grandfather get checked. They're saying the fire department got there just in time." Martha's voice remained quiet, but they still found people who couldn't make it out fast enough. Emily winced. 3 of them were taken to the ER. One of them was our florist, the woman who did the hydrangeas. She took a shaky sip from her water. Do you know what she said? That she didn't understand what was wrong until she nearly passed out. Across the room, the only sound for a while was a crayon brushing against paper. Noah looked up from his drawing, meeting his mother's eyes. "You're not mad?" Emily moved to the floor beside him, her hand resting gently on his knee. "No, sweetheart, I was scared, but I'm not mad. I didn't know what would happen," he said quietly. "I just knew we couldn't stay." "You were right," she said. He nodded and returned to his notebook. Martha finally leaned forward and asked, "What are you drawing now?" Noah hesitated, then turned the page so both women could see. It was another sketch, this one of the inside of a house. The living room was drawn in rough outlines, with a large window, a television, and a staircase leading upward. In the center was a figure, tall, male, falling or collapsing onto the floor. Above him were lines that might represent smoke or something else altogether. In the corner, a window was cracked open. A small potted plant tipped off a windowsill mid-fall. Emily frowned, studying the image. "Is this the dream you mentioned?" Noah nodded. "Do you know this man?" Martha asked. "No, but he's going to get hurt." Emily exchanged a glance with her mother. "Do you know where this house is?" "I don't think we've been there," Noah said, "but I feel like I'll know when I see it." There was no fear in his voice, only a strange, serene confidence that left both women unnerved. Emily sat back and sighed. "It's hard to wrap my head around any of this." Martha nodded. "The hard part isn't believing him anymore. It's figuring out what to do next." The rest of the evening moved slowly. Noah was eventually coaxed into a warm bath and a change of clothes. Martha made grilled cheese sandwiches, which he ate half-heartedly, more focused on finishing another drawing in the food in front of him. Emily retreated to the guest room briefly, returning with a stack of folded laundry she had never gotten to before the wedding. By 9 o'clock, the house was quiet again. The 3 of them sat in the living room, bathed in lamplight, the air still and heavy with the unspoken. Then, without warning, Noah spoke. "There's a man in a blue sweater. He dropped something. That's how it starts." Martha looked over slowly. "When does it happen?" Noah didn't answer. Emily sat forward. "What kind of something? What does he drop?" Noah's eyes narrowed in thought. "It's round, small, It rolls under a table. He reaches for it. Then he falls. Emily put a hand to her chest. Is it poison? Or something in the air again? I don't know, Noah said, but it's not an accident. That chilled Martha more than anything he had said so far. You mean someone hurts him? She asked. I think so, but I don't know who or why. Emily stood and began to pace, her fingers tangled in her own hair. This isn't a dream anymore. This is something else. It was never just a dream, Martha said, not with how the day unfolded. They fell into silence again, interrupted only by the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. At last, Martha rose and walked into her office. She returned with a thick, leather-bound photo album. She placed it on the coffee table, opening it to a spread of pictures from past family holidays and community events. Start here, she said to Noah. Look at the houses, the people. Tell me if anything looks like the place in your dream. He nodded solemnly and moved closer, flipping pages with focused intensity. For the next 30 minutes, he examined each photo, pausing only occasionally, shaking his head after every page. He moved carefully, methodically. Then, halfway through the album, he froze. This one. Martha leaned over. The photo was from a 4th of July cookout 5 years ago. In the background was a house with beige siding, white trim, and a wide bay window. A man stood on the porch, holding a paper plate and talking to another guest. Emily leaned in. That's Mr. Langley's house. Martha nodded. Arthur Langley, retired mechanic. Lives 2 streets over. Noah pointed to window. That's the room. Emily stared. You're sure? Yes. Martha closed the album gently, her mind already moving. Then tomorrow, she said, we pay Mr. Langley a visit. The morning air carried a thin mist as Martha stepped onto her porch, the boards creaking beneath her feet. She held a small wicker basket with 2 jars of homemade peach preserves and a linen napkin folded neatly on top. A polite excuse, a reason to visit Arthur Langley without immediately sounding like a madwoman. It was just after 9 o'clock, and the neighborhood was quiet save for the occasional bird call or the distant rumble of a garbage truck turning onto another street. Emily followed behind her, a little slower, her arms folded tightly as though she were trying to hold her thoughts in place. Noah walked between them, his face unreadable. They turned the corner and made their way up the familiar sidewalk. Mr. Langley's house looked the same as it had in the photograph. Beige siding, clean white trim, a bay window framed by shrubs that had recently been trimmed. A flag fluttered lazily near the porch, and a cat lay stretched on the steps, blinking lazily at them as they approached. Martha took a breath and knocked. A few seconds passed, then footsteps shuffled behind the door. Arthur Langley, in his early 70s with a wiry frame and thick glasses, opened the door wearing a navy blue cardigan and dark slacks. His thinning hair stood slightly askew, as though he'd been dozing in a chair and only just woke up. Martha Jacobs, he said, smiling. Well, now there's a nice surprise. Morning, Arthur. We were out for a walk and thought we'd drop by with some preserves. Emily and Noah are with me. Arthur stepped aside. Come in, with a thoughtful gift. They entered the living room, which smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. The space was neat, with old photographs along the mantel and a worn recliner near the window. A ceramic bowl of wrapped mints sat on a small table beside the couch. Noah stood very still in the center of the room, looking around with sharp eyes. We won't stay long, Martha said, placing the basket on a sideboard. We just had a little, concern and thought we'd check in on you. Arthur laughed lightly. What kind of concern could I possibly be the subject of? Emily cleared her throat. We saw a photo the other night, one from a cookout a few years ago. It brought your house to mind. And Noah, he remembered something. Arthur raised an eyebrow and looked down at the boy. That right? Noah nodded but didn't speak. Martha decided to tread carefully. He's been having impressions of places, events. He saw something that looked like your living room. Arthur looked amused more than concerned. Well, it's not the most exciting room, but I suppose it leaves an impression. Emily stepped forward. Mr. Langley? Noah said you might be in danger, that something could happen in this room, something serious. Arthur's smile faded slightly. He folded his arms, then glanced at Noah again. Danger how? Noah finally spoke. You're going to drop something. It rolls under the table. You bend over to reach it. Then you fall. I don't know why, but it's bad. Arthur blinked. And you dreamed this? Yes. It felt real. The silence in the room stretched longer than anyone liked. The ticking of the wall clock became suddenly prominent. Well, I'll be honest, Arthur said finally, sitting down on the edge of the couch. I don't know what to make of that. I've lived here for over 30 years and never so much as tripped over a rug. But is there anything here, Martha pressed, that you think could cause a problem? Something hazardous? A medication, maybe? A health condition? Arthur shrugged. I take blood pressure pills, same as half the men my age. But I've never blacked out, never fainted. I've got a clean bill of health as of 3 months ago. Martha's eyes narrowed slightly. Where do you usually keep your pills? Kitchen cabinet. Why? Is there any chance you dropped one recently? Arthur paused. Now that you mention it, yesterday morning I knocked a bottle off the counter. It spilled. I picked them up though. All of them. He frowned. I think so. Emily stepped toward the coffee table. Can I look under here? He nodded. She knelt and reached into the shadowed space beneath the table. A second later, she pulled out a small, round pill. Arthur leaned forward. Must have missed one. Emily looked at Martha. He said it was round and rolled under the table. Arthur exhaled, the color draining slightly from his face. That's oddly specific. Martha sat down across from him. I know this is strange, Arthur, but you need to take this seriously. Noah's warning helped us avoid something terrible yesterday. He saw it before it happened. Arthur looked again at the boy. You're saying this is some kind of vision? Noah tilted his head. It just comes. I don't ask it to. Arthur rubbed his temples. Well, I don't know what I believe anymore, but if you hadn't shown up, I probably would have dropped that pill again and been to get it. Could have passed out. Hit my head. Emily asked, Do you live alone? Since my wife passed. My daughter checks in once a week. Martha looked him in the eye. I think someone needs to be with you, at least for a while. Arthur nodded slowly, the weight of the conversation finally grounding in him. I'll call Rachel. She can come stay for a few days. Martha smiled gently. That would be wise. They left the house not long after. Outside, the mist had cleared and the sun now filtered through the branches, making dappled patterns along the sidewalk. As they walked back, Emily remained quiet until they reached the corner. You saw it again before we left, didn't you? She asked Noah. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked up at her and said, It's fading now, like a picture getting blurry. Martha placed a hand on his shoulder. Then maybe we did enough. But even as they continued walking, Martha could not shake the feeling that the clarity of his vision, so precise, so accurate, was not fading because danger had passed, but because something new was beginning to form. Something not yet seen, not yet understood. The questions were piling up. What was the source of Noah's visions? Why now? And how far would they take him and them before the answers came? Later that evening, while the house was wrapped in its usual quiet, Martha sat alone at the dining room table. The only light came from the overhead fixture, casting a golden hue across the surface cluttered with teacups, mail, and a stack of Noah's drawings. Emily had gone upstairs to take a long bath, her nerves visibly frayed from the day's events. Noah was in his room, supposedly asleep, though Martha knew the boy's mind never truly rested. She reached for his notebook, the one he had carried under his arm since the wedding. Its cover was worn, the corners slightly bent, the spine creased from frequent use. She hadn't looked through it completely before, only glimpsed the sketches he chose to share. Now, however, something urged her to go deeper. She opened the notebook and began flipping through the pages slowly. Carefully, the first dozen pages were what she expected. Scenes from school, simple sketches of animals, a few cartoonish spaceships. Then came the drawings that unsettled her, the ones that didn't belong in a child's imagination. There was a meadow brook in, unmistakable despite the simple style, with smoke swirling from the roof and faceless stick figures scattered like fallen matchsticks. In the margin, small clouds had been drawn over and over, as if Noah's hand had kept returning to them without his knowing. On the next page, a car driving away from the chaos, a woman behind the wheel, her grandmother, clearly, and a child beside her, both smiling as they moved into the distance. The scene was dated. 2 days before the wedding. Martha turned the page again. This one was new. She paused. A man, crumpled at the base of a table, a small circle, perhaps the dropped pill, near his outstretched hand. Smoke again, but this time it seemed to curl around his head like fingers. There was a second figure in the background, drawn faintly. Unclear. Observing? Causing? It was impossible to tell. She closed the notebook gently and stared at it, her mind racing. There was a thread forming now, between dreams and reality, between vision and action. And Noah wasn't just seeing danger. He was documenting it, recording moments before they occurred, as if some part of him understood what others couldn't. The creak of a step broke the silence. She turned to find Noah standing at the bottom of the stairs, barefoot, his hair tousled from bed. "I can't sleep," he said softly. Martha nodded and pulled out the chair beside her. "Come sit with me." He climbed into the chair and rested his elbows on the table, chin in his hands. "You looked through it." "I did." "Are you mad?" "No, sweetheart. I'm just trying to understand." Noah tapped the edge of the notebook. "I don't always know when they're coming. The pictures. Sometimes they just show up in my head, like a memory from the future." Martha tilted her head. "Does it hurt?" "No, but it makes me tired." She reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind his ear. "You've been carrying a lot." He nodded. "I don't want bad things to happen. I just want people to be safe." "You've already done that. Twice now." He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the notebook to a blank page and pulled a pencil from the middle of the stack. Without speaking, he began to draw again, slow and deliberate. Martha didn't interrupt. She watched the lines appear. First a street lamp, then the outline of a road, a building with a flat roof, a sign above the door. As the image developed, her breath caught. It was the town's hardware store. She recognized the cracked sidewalk, the crooked downspout near the entrance. Noah looked up at her. "I saw a little while ago. It was raining, and the lights inside were off." Martha studied the drawing. "Was anyone there?" He drew 2 more figures, one behind the counter, one entering the shop. "What happens?" Noah frowned, his pencil hovering. "I don't know. It's like it stopped before it finished." "You mean you didn't see the danger?" "I saw a spark, but then it disappeared." A chill ran down her spine. "A spark." He nodded, like wires touching, like something breaking. Martha stood and began pacing slowly. Her heart was racing now, not from panic, but from a sense of helpless urgency. It was like being handed a warning without a time or a reason. She turned to him again. "Do you think it's soon?" Noah shrugged. "I think so. I don't draw far away things." Martha moved to the sideboard and pulled out a small address book. She flipped to the hardware store's page and dialed the number listed. After 4 rings, someone picked up. "Jenkins Hardware," came the gruff voice of the owner, Rick Jenkins. "Rick, it's Martha Jacobs. I'm sorry to call so late." "Martha? Everything all right?" "I hope so. I was wondering, will anyone be in the store tomorrow morning?" "Well, just me. I've got delivery scheduled before we open." "Why?" Martha chose her words carefully. "Would you mind doing me a favor and checking the wiring behind your counter? I know it sounds strange, but someone mentioned they saw a spark near there earlier today." Rick paused. "A spark? I know it's odd, but please just check." After a long moment, he said, "All right, I'll take a look." "Thank you." She hung up and turned back to Noah. "Even if it's just a maybe," she said, "we have to act." He nodded, satisfied. Then his face changed. He flipped back several pages and tapped one of the earlier drawings. "This one's different now," he whispered. Martha leaned in. It was the Meadowbrook drawing, but where there had once been only smoke, now a faint figure had been added, barely visible, almost a shadow, standing alone on a hill near the inn, facing away from the building. "I didn't draw that before," he said. "Do you know who it is?" He shook his head. "Did you see them?" "No, but I felt them." Martha stared at the page, something in her chest tightening. The figure was small, unremarkable, and yet its presence altered the entire scene. It was as if this person had watched the disaster from a distance. Not part of it, not escaping it, just witnessing it. Emily's voice came faintly from the top of the stairs. "Is everything okay?" Martha replied, "Yes, go back to sleep." But even as she said it, she knew sleep would not come easily. Not for her, and not for the boy who sat beside her with the future hiding in his hands. By the following morning, Emily had reached the threshold of her patience. After breakfast, which none of them really ate, she stood in the kitchen clutching her phone, staring at the screen as though waiting for it to offer permission. Martha, seated at the table across from Noah, noticed her daughter's expression and understood what was coming before Emily said a word. "I want him to see someone," Emily said. Her voice wasn't sharp, but it was firm. Martha set her tea down. "You think he's making it up?" "No," Emily replied quickly, shaking her head. "It's not that. I believe him. That's the problem. I believe him too much. And I don't know what to do with that. I need someone who can help us understand what's happening to him." Noah, who had been peeling the paper from a crayon idly, didn't look up. "You want to see a doctor?" Emily moved closer and knelt beside him. "Not because I think something is wrong with you, but because I think something very rare is happening. You're seeing things that haven't happened yet. That's not normal, sweetheart." "I know," he said quietly. "I just want to know if you're okay, if your brain is okay. That's all." Noah nodded, slow and calm. "I'll go, but I don't think they'll understand." Within 2 hours, they were seated in the waiting room of Dr. Karen Weiss, a highly recommended child psychologist who had worked for over 20 years in both clinical and academic settings. Her office was located in a 2-story brick building near the center of town, tucked between a dental practice and a law firm. The waiting area was cheerful enough. Bright rugs, soft chairs, a table with coloring books and wooden puzzles. But the mood between mother and son remained taut. Dr. Weiss emerged just before their scheduled time. Her dark red hair clipped back, a soft expression on her face. "Emily," she said warmly. "And Noah?" Emily stood. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice." Dr. Weiss smiled and gestured toward her office. "Come in. Let's talk." The room was decorated in soothing tones, with shelves of children's books, a few framed degrees, and a large window that let in natural light. She offered Noah a seat on a beanbag and motioned for Emily to sit nearby. "I'll ask you both some questions," she said. "But first, I just want to know why you're here today." Emily explained carefully, trying to frame the events without sounding hysterical. She described a wedding, the moment Noah insisted they leave, and the gas leak that followed. She described the drawing of Mr. Langley's house, the pill under the table, and the subsequent confirmation. Dr. Weiss listened without interruption, taking notes with measured interest. "And these visions," she said after a moment, turning to Noah, "you don't always choose when they happen?" "No," Noah said. "They just show up, like pictures in my head." "Do they hurt?" "No." "Do they make you feel afraid?" "Sometimes." "Do you hear voices or see people that no one else can see?" "No, just the pictures." Dr. Weiss paused, then leaned forward slightly. "When did the pictures start?" Noah thought. "A few weeks before the wedding. I was dreaming a lot. Then I started drawing what I saw. Then it started happening." Dr. Weiss turned back to Emily. "Has there been any trauma in the family recently? Any major stressors?" Emily shook her head. "Nothing unusual. His grandfather died 4 years ago, but he was too young to really understand it. School's been fine. He's always been creative, but never like this." Dr. Weiss nodded slowly and wrote something down. "I'd like to spend some time with him one-on-one, if that's okay. Just to talk. You can wait right outside." Emily hesitated, then agreed. She kissed Noah's head and stepped out. Inside the room, Dr. Weiss watched the boy closely. "Can I see one of your drawings?" Noah reached into his backpack and handed her the notebook, already open to the latest page. She studied the sketch of the hardware store, noting the details, the open window, the figures, the wiring behind the counter. She had met hundreds of children in her career, many with vivid imaginations, but this drawing did not carry the usual signs of fantasy. It was precise, purposeful. "You said this hasn't happened yet?" Noah nodded. "Not yet." Dr. Weiss set the book down. "Do you know what it means to have a premonition?" Noah blinked. "Like, knowing the future?" "In a way, yes. Some people believe in it. Some people don't. But it's very rare for children to experience it the way you're describing." "I don't want to see bad things," he said suddenly. "I just want people to be safe." Dr. Weiss studied him carefully. No signs of delusion, no evident anxiety, no confusion in his speech or thought process. He was calm, intelligent, direct, and more than that, he believed every word he was saying, not in a detached or fantastical way, but with clarity and emotional grounding. She asked him a few more questions about school, friends, dreams, and he answered each with the same unshaken presence. When Emily returned, Dr. Weiss offered her a measured summary. "I don't believe he's suffering from any psychological disorder," she said. "There are no signs of schizophrenia, dissociative issues, or trauma-based delusions. He's stable, articulate, and deeply empathetic." Emily looked stunned. "Then what is this?" Dr. Weiss hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. I've seen imaginative children. I've seen troubled children. But your son doesn't fit either category. If he were making this up, there would be inconsistencies. But there aren't. So what do I do?" "Trust him, but also protect him. Monitor how frequently this happens. See if there's any pattern. And prepare yourself. If these visions continue, the reactions from people around you may become more complicated than you expect." Emily stood, gathering her coat. "They already have." Back at home that evening, Martha listened to the report in full. She was quiet for a long time, then finally looked at her daughter. "You were hoping for a rational explanation." Emily sighed. "I was hoping for any explanation, but now I'm more convinced than ever that we're in uncharted territory." Noah sat on the floor nearby, drawing again. This time it was a forest, tall trees, a clearing in the center. No buildings, no people, just nature, still and quiet. Martha watched the scene unfold in pencil. "Maybe it's a peaceful one this time," she whispered. But even as she said it, she saw the way Noah's hand paused midway, hovering over the page. He turned the pencil slightly and began sketching a new figure, standing at the edge of the trees, half-shadowed, not approaching, not turning away, just watching. The next Sunday, the house was unusually quiet, even for a family that had grown accustomed to silence these past few days. The blinds were drawn in the front room, casting the space in soft half-light, and Martha stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the late afternoon sun bleed orange across the tops of the sycamores. Emily sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a rigid expression, reading a thread in a private group chat she'd once been added to for wedding planning. Noah was upstairs in his room, the door closed, his sketchbook untouched for the first time in days. Martha spoke without turning. "How bad is it?" Emily didn't respond at first. Her jaw clenched slightly as she kept scrolling. Finally, she set the phone on the coffee table. "It's gotten worse," she said flatly. "They're calling you a manipulator." "Me too. They're saying I staged the whole thing to draw attention, or, I don't even know, to sabotage the wedding somehow." Martha turned to face her. "Sabotage? Emily, your son." "I know." Emily buried her face in her hands. "I know, but they don't care. Meredith's been talking to people behind my back. Some of Jared's cousins have been spreading things online." Martha sat beside her daughter and placed a hand on her back. "Does Jared know? He's trying to stay out of it. He says he believes me, but I can tell he's pulled in too many directions. He won't offend us outright. He's trying to play the middle." Martha's tone hardened. "That's not good enough. He's your husband." Emily exhaled slowly. I told him we needed space. He didn't argue. The air between them thickened with silence. Outside, a breeze stirred the trees. A squirrel darted across the porch railing. Inside, time seemed to stretch thin, as though waiting for someone to finally break. Martha rubbed her temples. All because you listened to your son. All because we didn't stay and pretend everything was fine. It's not just that, Emily said. It's that we didn't explain it. We couldn't. They want logic. They want someone to blame. And since we can't give them an answer that makes sense, they've decided we're the ones who disrupted the celebration. We saved lives, Martha said. Emily's voice cracked. I know that, but it doesn't feel like it matters anymore. There was a knock at the door. Both women turned, startled. Martha stood and walked slowly to the door, opening it to reveal Jared standing awkwardly on the porch, his hands in his jacket pockets, his face drawn with exhaustion. Can I come in? He asked. Martha opened the door wider and stepped aside. Jared walked into the living room with an uncertainty that made the space feel smaller. He glanced at Emily, then at the table, where her phone still buzzed periodically with new messages. I didn't come to argue, he said quickly. I just needed to see you. Both of you. Emily folded her arms. So? What do you want to say? Jared looked down. I know you didn't fake anything. I know Noah saw something real. But my family, they're struggling to accept what happened. It's not just the gas leak. It's how everything unfolded. The way you left without saying anything. The timing. The notebook. Emily's eyes flared. Do you hear how that sounds? We're being blamed for saving ourselves. I'm not saying it's fair. I just want you to know how much pressure I'm under. They think we're keeping secrets. That maybe Noah's being coached. Emily stood abruptly. Coach, Martha's voice rose, sharp and cold. You're really bringing that theory into this house? I'm not accusing, Jared said quickly. I'm telling you what they're saying, what they're whispering in their little circles. I'm trying to manage it. Emily shook her head. You're trying to play both sides. And I can't live like that. Not when our son is waking up in the middle of the night shaking because he saw someone die in a dream. Jared took a breath, stepped toward her. I'm scared too. Do you think I haven't had nightmares? That I haven't lain awake, wondering what it means that our son sees these things? Emily backed away. Then imagine how it feels for him. Noah's voice came softly from the stairs. I didn't mean to make everyone mad. They turned to see him standing there, holding his sketchbook against his chest. His eyes were tired, not from lack of sleep, but from the emotional weight of the last few days. Martha moved to him quickly and knelt beside him. You didn't do anything wrong. I saw something again, he whispered. Emily stepped forward, her anger dissolving. What is it, honey? Noah opened the notebook and showed them the newest drawing. It was a family, 3 figures, mother, father, child, standing apart from each other, a gap between them. In the background, a larger figure stood with arms outstretched, as if trying to pull them back together. But the ground beneath was cracked. Jared stared at it. Is that us? Noah nodded, but it's not too late. Emily knelt and cupped his face. We're not going anywhere, okay? You're not losing anyone. Jared dropped into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this. Then stop trying to explain it to everyone else, Martha said, rising to her feet. Start by choosing who you believe. There was no response, just the soft ticking of the wall clock and the quiet rustle of leaves outside. Emily picked up Noah and sat on the couch, holding him tightly. Jared finally stood. I'm going to need time, but I want to understand. I want to be part of this. Emily nodded slowly. Then be here. Really be here. I will. He turned to leave but paused at the door. When I got the call about the wedding, they told me if the leak had been discovered 5 minutes later, the ignition from the heating system could have taken the whole structure down. Your mom leaving when she did. It might have saved more than just you, too. Martha didn't reply. She didn't need to. Jared opened the door and stepped into the fading light. The rift remained, but the edges had softened. And in the space between, a family stood, not whole, not broken, but waiting to see what would come next. The following week brought a cold front, and the sudden drop in temperature seemed to cast a hush over the entire town. The air was heavier, the skies overcast, and the trees stood stiff with late autumn defiance. Inside Martha's house, the radiator hissed quietly in the corners, and the scent of cinnamon tea lingered in the kitchen. Life had not returned to normal. Far from it. But a strange rhythm had taken hold, a rhythm shaped not by routine but by necessity. Emily arrived early that morning, alone, wearing a navy coat and no makeup, her face pale and unreadable. She stood on the porch for a few minutes before knocking. When Martha opened the door, there was no surprise, no exclamation, just a silent exchange of understanding between mother and daughter. They sat in the living room, the same place they had sat for nearly every crucial conversation since the wedding. Noah was at school, a decision made after careful deliberation and reassurance from his teacher that he would be gently monitored. It was the first time in a week he had been separated from either woman, and the quiet in the house felt almost unnatural without the scratch of his pencil or the soft turning of notebook pages. Emily cradled her tea with both hands, her gaze fixed on the rising steam. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice soft but steady, "about choosing where I stand. And I realize I've been trying to live in two realities." Martha listened, giving her space. "I've been trying to protect Noah from the world and the world from Noah, but I can't do both anymore." Martha nodded slowly. "You shouldn't have to." Emily set the cup down on the coffee table and turned fully toward her mother. "You didn't hesitate. You listened to him. You trusted your instinct. You didn't try to explain it away or make it smaller. I've been trying to make it smaller ever since. I've had more time to learn when instincts matter," Martha said. "But it's not about me, Emily. It's about you and Noah." Emily took a breath. "Jared and I talked, really talked, not just about the wedding or his family or the gossip. We talked about what it means to be Noah's parents now and how this changes everything." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Is he ready to understand it?" "He's trying," she said, "and that's all I can ask right now. But I told him this is a phase. It's not going away. It's part of who Noah is." Martha leaned forward. "And what did he say?" "He asked me if I could live with the uncertainty, the public scrutiny, the fear, and..." Emily's eyes shimmered. "I told him I couldn't live without our son." There was a long pause, the air between them filling with quiet relief and unresolved worry. "I'm going to pull back from the Langleys," Emily said. "Let the rumors settle. Let the invitations stop. If that means some bridges burn, so be it." "You're choosing your family," Martha said. Emily smiled faintly. Finally, they sat in silence again, watching the wind ripple through the bare branches outside. "He drew something again last night," Emily said, "while I was getting ready for bed. I found it on his desk." Martha tensed. "What was it?" "A building. Not here, I think. Big, glass windows. A high ceiling. Lots of people inside. He didn't title it or explain it, but it didn't look dangerous." Martha considered this. "Maybe not everything he sees is a warning." "Maybe," Emily said. "Or maybe it's just not a warning for us." They exchanged a glance, one laced with mutual dread and the slow realization that Noah's gift, whatever it truly was, could grow beyond their reach. Emily stood and moved to the window, staring out at the town below. "When I was pregnant with him," she said, "I used to dream that he would be special, not in some supernatural way, just impactful, that he'd move through the world with purpose." Martha joined her at the window. "He already is." "But what if it keeps getting harder?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. "What if his visions get darker? What if people stop being grateful and start being afraid?" Martha didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. "Then we hold on to him even tighter," she said. "And we make sure he always knows where home is." Later that afternoon, Noah came to the front door with his backpack slung loosely over one shoulder and a crumpled paper in his hand. "Hi, Grandma," he said, setting his things down. "How was school?" He shrugged. "Quiet, but okay." Emily met him in the hallway. "Did anything happen today?" He thought for a moment. One of the kids tripped on the stairs. I saw it before it happened. Emily froze. What did you do? I moved my foot, he said simply, so he wouldn't fall on me. He didn't even know. Martha knelt in front of him. Did you draw anything? He handed her the crumpled paper. It was a room filled with people seated in rows, all facing the same direction. At the front of the room, a podium. Behind it, a man standing with one hand raised. There were no flames, no shadows, no sense of urgency. Just attention. Focus. Quiet. Emily unfolded it carefully, reading every detail. It looks like a speech, she said. Noah nodded, but not a scary one. Do you know where it is? Martha asked. No, but it's far. Emily looked at her mother. He's starting to see beyond the town. Martha's thoughts darkened at the realization. Then it's not just about keeping him safe anymore. It's about helping him understand what this is becoming. I'll talk to the school, Emily said. We need someone there who knows what to watch for. I'll call Dr. Weiss. Martha added, we'll keep a record of the drawings. Timestamps, dates. We'll make a system. Noah stood quietly between them, watching their exchange. You're not scared? He asked. Emily knelt to meet his eyes. Not of you. Never of you. He nodded, then turned and went to his room, already pulling another page from the notebook as he walked. The women stood in the hallway a moment longer, uncertain of what lay ahead but newly certain of their path. A mother had made her choice. And now, so had her daughter. The photograph arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked into a white envelope without a return address. It had no letter attached, no explanation. Only the image itself, glossy and rich in color, standing out against the beige of the Jacobs mailbox pile like a memory waiting to be claimed. Martha found it while sorting through bills and store flyers, and she paused the moment her fingers touched it. Something about the envelope felt deliberate, careful. She opened it slowly at the kitchen table. Inside was a single 5x7 print. The image showed the moment just before everything had shifted, just before the quiet had cracked and the world turned uncertain. The photo was taken from a distance, likely by one of the professional photographers hired for the wedding. It captured the outdoor reception area from a wide angle. The rows of chairs beneath the oak tree, the white tent in the background, the early afternoon light casting a warm hue over the gathering guests. In the foreground, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was Martha. She stood with her back to the camera, one hand holding the wrist of a small boy. Noah. He was turning to look back, his mouth slightly open, his free hand raised mid-gesture, as if trying to say something. Together. They were moving away from the crowd, toward the gravel path that led around the inn and into the parking lot. No one else seemed to be paying them any mind. The ceremony had just ended. All eyes were focused on the bride and groom. But in the stillness of the image, the choice to walk away glowed with quiet clarity. Martha stared at it for a long time before calling Emily. By late morning, mother and daughter sat together at the kitchen table, the photograph between them. Emily traced the edge of the photo with her finger, not speaking at first. I don't remember seeing anyone take this, she said. I don't think you were meant to, Martha replied. It's the only one like it. Noah entered the room with a cereal box in one hand and a crayon in the other. He paused when he saw the image on the table, then walked over and leaned in to get a closer look. That's when we left, he said. Yes, Emily said. That's exactly when. He studied it carefully, then nodded. I don't think anyone else saw us. You were quiet, Martha said, but you knew exactly what to do. Noah looked up at them, uncertain. Do you think people will ever believe me? Emily pulled him into her lap. It doesn't matter what people believe. You saved lives. You trusted what you saw, and I'm proud of you. He rested his head against her shoulder. It still feels weird sometimes, like I'm watching a movie that no one else can see. Martha smiled gently. Maybe that's what it is. And maybe it's your job to decide which scenes matter. They sat there together, the morning light drifting across the table, catching the edges of the photo. Later that day, Emily took the photograph to the local print shop and had it framed. She selected a thin black border, simple and elegant, then returned home and placed it on the living room wall, just above the fireplace. Below it, on a small brass plate, she asked him to engrave a single line. Sometimes, the smallest voice speaks the loudest. It became a quiet anchor in their home. Guests would ask about it, some with genuine curiosity, others with veiled skepticism, and Emily would explain only what she needed to, that it was from the wedding, that it was a moment of instinct, that it mattered. Over the following weeks, the family found a fragile balance. Jared returned, not with declarations or demands, but with a quiet willingness to listen. He asked questions. He read Noah's drawings. He didn't always understand, but he stopped doubting. Dr. Weiss continued to meet with Noah once a week. She remained baffled by the boy's clarity, but she began documenting his sketches with clinical rigor. Together with Emily and Martha, they created a timeline of visions. When they came, what they showed, and what, if anything, resulted from them. Not all the drawings were warnings. Some were peaceful rivers, hillsides, empty fields bathed in golden light. Others showed cities with unfamiliar skylines, faces they didn't recognize, places that felt both distant and inevitable. But none of them came without purpose. One afternoon, Noah drew a bridge, a long, arched structure over water. In the distance, someone stood at the railing. That image was shared with a local counselor who worked with at-risk youth. A day later, an anonymous tip prevented a tragedy. The town never knew who sent it. Noah didn't always understand what he saw, but he drew and he trusted, and the people closest to him made sure his visions were treated with dignity, not fear. The rift in the family remained, though it faded over time. The Langleys stopped calling. Some wedding guests kept their distance. Others offered quiet apologies when they learned how close they had all come to disaster. But for Martha, Emily, and Noah, that day became a pivot, a moment when one voice, small and frightened, had turned the tide. On the first anniversary of the wedding, the three of them returned to Meadowbrook Inn. It had reopened after extensive repairs, its grounds restored, its reputation recovered. They didn't stay long. Just a short walk along gravel path, a quiet pause beneath the oak tree. Noah stood where he had once whispered those fateful words to his grandmother and looked up at her. "Do you think it'll happen again?" Martha knelt beside him. Maybe not. But if it does, you'll know what to do." He nodded. Then he took her hand, and they walked back to the car together. In the back seat, his notebook waited. Not finished, just paused, ready for the next page.